and welcome back to All Around the World Leaders, a show from the Red Path Network where your host Dara talks to different Warhammer players from all around the world. Today we're going to be talking to Maxine about her competitive takes on the new World Leaders Codex. It's going to be a great episode, so grab yourself a brew and let's dive in. Hello everyone and welcome back. This is episode 2 of All Around the World Leaders, and today I am joined by Maxine, a wonderful
Hiya.
world leader player of renown across the globe. Maxine, why don't you say hello to everyone? You've been on the channel before, but some people might not have seen. But yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about, who you are, what armies you play, all the good stuff.
Hiya. Oh, that introduction was way too kind. Well, global renown, you say. But yeah, I'm Maxine from Instagram. Maxine also plays 40k on Instagram. We play events. I pretty much play mainly World Eaters and Dark Angels. World Eaters are my first love. They're the army I played pretty much exclusively for 10 years. And then I branched into Dark Angels just a little bit, just to get some more competitive options as we were waiting for our new book. And here we are. And now I've
Indeed.
got new models.
And you have two armies that are very good in the meta right now.
Oh my God, it's a huge headache right now. Like currently I can only really play my Dark Angels because I'm waiting for all the new models to come and get commissioned out.
Yeah.
Which I've got a lot of new models coming in for the World Eaters. Like I'm gonna deck that army out. But
Nice.
they
How
are
how is
so
that how's that like decision, right? Because like obviously, we'll say in a hypothetical you're going to an event and you have your new world leaders army.
mhm.
How do you like make that decision between do I want to play Dark Angels or World Leaders? Because it seems like you're really into Dark Angels over the last while. Like I've been following all your progress on Instagram and I'm like, damn,
Yeah,
they look
say
pretty
that the
cool.
last first year of 9,000 to World Eaters, because that's the only army I owned. And I went to events with a very scratchy army. Let's just say I only owned 12 Berserkers. So going to events, I was using like a Forge Fiend, a Hell Root, I had two Rhinos. It was like I actually brought like I think it was about 20 standard Chaos Space Marines at the time, or now Legionnaires, but it's just like this is a very bare bones army. Um, and it's one I was trying to build up. So it's just like I kind of knew the new book slash new models might be on the way at some point. I'm sure lots of people did. So investing in like a much bigger World Eaters force always felt like a very
Risky kind of
dicey.
maneuver,
It
yeah.
was a risky maneuver, yeah. Like the army I built up was about 2,400 points. It was over 10 years through like college and um, being basically a broke student. So it's not like it's fully decked out just yet.
Yeah.
But
Like the toys that you
now,
had rather than the toys you necessarily wanted, right?
exactly. And it
Yeah.
was the army I loved. And I wanted to make sure that army was going to be perfect. So I got a few units just to help me get through, make it feel more World Eaters. So I got made sure I got the new Khorne model because I had the old one. So I was just like,
Oh,
get the
I
new one. So
love that model. The old one. I've been on the hunt for that one for a while. He's so cool.
it's brilliant.
Yeah.
So I made sure I updated that. I got the new Terminators, and they're like my favorite thing. Um, but basically, I kind of left it, and then Katie is our resident painter because I can't paint because I'm colorblind and have the patience of a spoon for for
Rough combo for
painting.
the painting, yeah.
Yeah, I can build and I like building. I've now
Mm.
been sacked from building because Katie has higher standards than I can build now. So I'm just like, oh, right, okay. And Katie has her painting has gone phenomenal. Like
Yeah, for sure.
she's next level.
For
And
sure.
she's taken up the Black Templars now. So her pile of shame, she's got like 5,000 points of Black Templars.
Yep.
So
I saw the tower on Instagram a couple of times. It's pretty grim.
yeah, and it's like people keep saying like, why she spent all that money on it? Most of that's from event winnings and other bits. So it wasn't like
Yep.
we threw tons of money at just a pile of shame.
Yeah, when
But
when
as
when you're
such,
very good at the game, you get lots of prizes all the time, which is nice.
it does help.
It does help. Yeah, it does help.
As weirdly enough, that little band of world eaters has helped fund my addiction.
Hey, look, if it
So
works, it works.
it seems to work. So then I was just like, okay, I kind of need another army to play something. A, to be a bit more competitive. B, to kind of scratch the itch of wanting to expand my army and to actually build a new collection, but without the fear of it being redundant in about a year's, 2 years' time.
Hmm.
Um, and I got like the seventh edition starter box set because I wanted the chaos stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
As you see, my Chaos Lord was from that. I had a few other units from there as well. Hence why I have so many Chaos, just standard Chaos Space Marines, because I basically just bought like 3 starter boxes of many editions going through, and it's basically just Chaos Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines,
Yep.
standard infantry stuff. So I was just like, I've got a few Dark Angel models, which I was tempted about converting into Chaos, but then my brain was like, no, converting them doesn't seem quite right for me. The Terminators just look very different, and the bikers are obviously very different with their big wings and all that kind of stuff. So I was just like, maybe Dark Angels are interesting. And I went listening to their lore, I read a few books, and it's just like, oh, they're actually quite interesting. And there's 3 armies in one. They've got Terminators, and I was just like, Terminators, I'm all in. I can
I'm
have an
getting the
army of
vibe
just
that
Terminators.
Terminators are a big deal, right?
They're a big deal for me.
Yeah.
This conversation goes on, you may see one or two of my gripes about the new bet.
Yeah, I
But
wonder. I wonder. We'll
But
we'll get there. We'll get there.
um, so I was then like, okay, I'll get Dark Angels, and I commissioned. I basically bought the deck. I went into a dark room, and this is the first time I can actually write a list from scratch. And I was just like, I can make it competitive because the Dark Angel book has just been released. I can go right. How gnarly can I make a list? So I went in and I did my own little thing. I basically was in there for about 2 hours and came back out and right, 2,000 points. I'm getting that commissioned up. And I literally got a flat 2,000 point commission list basically done to come through and to look as I wanted. And I had the flavor of I wanted it to be focused around Terminators, so I wanted to make it as good as it can be for Terminators, but I wanted a bit of the other wings as well, just to actually build a collection. Because I don't just want to have an army of Dark Angels that won't last editions, but I wanted a collection. I
Yeah,
wanted to be
yeah.
able
You
to put
want
it on the shelves and look
something
nice and pretty.
sustainable as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
That's
Katie built up a few extra bits for my Dark Angel, so I now have a reasonable green wing um, thing as well. But I took that list to like the first event, and I was in like the finals, going 4-0 with like 4 100 scores all the way through until the finals. And I was like, "Ooh, this list is scary.
yep. Yeah, it
I
must have
built
been a
something terrible."
big change up from the world leader. I mean, like you had great success with the world leaders as well. Like, let's be real. I
I
remember
think the best was 4-1. I think I went with my scratch list,
yeah,
and it was like
I remember when you did that. I was looking at your list and I was like, I just don't
it was
understand
terrible.
how this has happened. Like it was awesome. It was so cool to see it, but I was just like, yeah, I couldn't do this. No way, not in a million years. Like you could give me that list, practice it 100 times, it would not matter. I would never go 4-1. But you
And I'll
did,
tell
and
you
I
what,
was like, that's so cool.
that's one of the things that was actually quite interesting. So I had a lot of practice with that list because it was only the models I owned, and I played a lot with Lockdown with Katie. And like she was tearing her hair out with me because she plays in a slightly different vibe, as you probably see on tactics. Like she just loves the game itself and is just like, yeah, like she's fairly tactically astute. Like she's not dumb by any means and has done relatively well in events. But as she just obviously plays a bit different to me, whereas I come from a competitive chess background, and I was just like, but this is the move.
Yeah,
This is what I need to do. This is what I do to win. And she'd just be like, well, why have you said that? I was just
yeah.
like, because if I do it, you'll shout at me. And it's just like, but you've said it now, so you may as well do it. It's like, yeah, my brain just works that way.
Yeah, and it's a
Um,
fantastic I suppose having that tactical vision, having the port over from chess, like you're saying, is a really advantageous thing when it comes to playing 40k, especially competitively. I think it comes across in a it like there's probably quite a lot of things that you can port over from the game of chess into 40k, right? Especially when it comes to decision
it's
making.
massive. It's massive. I mean, anything from just learning how to read a player and your opponent is a one-on-one position, whether it's actually reading a board state, whether it's trying to set up moves or traps. World Eaters are a particular trap-based army, right?
For
You
sure.
kind of you've only got the limited spaces that you kind of cover, and because you can't be like in chess, say like with a bishop has a big sort of like laser pointer where it can go down. That's kind of like a range-based army, right? Having that big board control kind of thing. Whereas in World Eaters, you have to kind of work with like many pawns that
Yeah,
can
everyone
cover
feels like
certain
a
big.
pawn or a knight, right? When it comes to world
Yeah,
leaders, like limited range, but like quite impactful in the range that they are able to work with, I
exactly.
guess.
A pawn
Yeah.
will take a queen if it's right next to it. So you
Yep.
kind of have to think about how you position your pieces to be able to trap the queens or the bishops, because that's what you got to do.
Hundred
And
percent.
opponents, sometimes I'm not necessarily expecting that way of thinking. So there's a few times where I turned up to Battle Bermondsey, great group of people based out in London. Quips the Nerds from there and a few other of the Conclave guys are there. And lovely group. They're like the first people I played outside of Kenny. We got invited to go there and have a gaming session, right? And I had no idea about sort of what level A my army was because I knew it was pretty rubbish, and B sort of like how other people played the game. And like the first game I played against was a guy named Charlie. He's one of my favorite guys to play, and he brought a beautiful Eldar list. And I think I won like 100 to I think 21, 22 points or something like that.
A
And it
big
was
win.
absolutely it was a big win. And he after the game he was just like, I just didn't expect someone to play that sort of game. I didn't know 40k could be played in that way. And I was just like, but it's just the same as chess. You're just moving your pieces around. Whereas obviously some people have a more, these are my sort of like models. I'm just like eating them up kind of thing.
You know,
And it's interesting.
I think you play the game that way, and I play the game probably more like the latter, where I'm like, oh, I have Angron, time to run him forward. But yeah, it's a fantastic mindset. I think like I've come up against maybe probably less than five people that I would say have that kind of like skill set, that view on the game. But I
Mm.
always find it super noticeable. When I am coming up against someone like that, it always strikes me as like as soon as I see that they're kind of making those plans and making those plays, I'm like, oh, I'm about to be absolutely devastated in this game. But yeah, it's a fantastic skill set to transfer over.
I've played a few players like that myself, and I find that we're all fairly similar in the sense that we're quite vocal about what we're doing.
Yep.
So quite often when I play people, like I think Alex puts the nerd again, who was just I played as Custodes, and in that game he was, unsure about what he was doing. He was just like, I'm going to try this, and it's just like, just see what happens. And when it came to my turn, he was kind of taken aback because I kind of just went, I'm going to move here, 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 and this is why. Because next turn you're going to have to go this direction, and you're going to have to move your Custodian Guard to this way, and then they're going to be somewhat caught off guard at the turn after because they're too slow and won't get back and across. And it's just like, huh?
Yeah, it's
And
that
it's like,
thinking like multiple turns ahead, right? Where you're like,
yeah,
this is where the state is going to be in battle round 3 or 4 or anything like that.
yeah, exactly. So like
Yeah.
dropping my Raptors in the background, rest in peace, Raptors, and it would just be like, this unit's here, it's going to make this play. If you make a play to kind of stop them, then that's fine. But because you've done that, I've both got another play open up because you've diverted your assets from there to there. And again, if you've done that and I can press forward, then I get an even bigger advantage than the one advantage that you're trying to cover. But I know that you're going to want to stop these Raptors because you hate people trying to be in your deployment zone because that's the kind of play style you are. Some people hate that, right? So they're just
Yeah.
like,
So
I'm
there's
going
an
to clear
there's a
you out.
not insignificant amount of like psyops there as well, right? Where like you say,
Yeah.
getting a read of the player and understanding maybe how you think they want to play and like the game that they want to play, and then disrupting that as well,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly. And so, sometimes you can even see it from like how they set up their board and or like even how they set up their side of the table. Sometimes you can tell from a player who wants to control their territory. But you can see how they set up all their bits, and then you just go, well, you might be a bit more of a board control style player, or you might be someone who doesn't like it when you get like an alpha strike or like units popping in here and there. Or you might see a player that's maybe a bit more chaotic with their bits, and you might think, okay, this is going to be a very open game, right? So you're
Yeah.
gonna you're gonna you're gonna start trying to you'll see your gaps and opportunities, but you just got to watch your back as you're playing, kind of thing.
Yeah, because like those chaotic players, anything can happen, right? They can sometimes just make a play, and you're like, oh my
Glory
god.
to chaos.
Yeah.
Glory to chaos.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I think
Exactly. They
I
might make the 1% play and it just pays off, and you're just like, you know what? Fair
yeah.
enough.
Yeah, like I'll just run everything forward and I'll make like 8-inch charges in the first turn and they will. And
Yeah.
there's really not much
And
you can do about that.
by and large, if you play 40k, if you just roll flat out all sixes, you'll win most games.
Yep,
If you plan for sixes, you'll be fine.
as all the good players say, just roll better.
Just roll bad.
But yeah, what a fantastic intro to your playstyle and everything about how you got into World Leaders. So obviously, we're here to talk a little bit about the World Leaders this evening. So we have a fantastic new book, Maxine. I don't know if you knew,
Oh,
but
isn't
we have
it
a
good?
codex now.
It doesn't it just feel weird? Like, do
It
you feel
does.
like it's its own faction yet?
No, I don't.
No,
Like
I
I
don't either.
actually last night I was sitting down to assemble some jackals or whatever, and I just happened to look to the side where my one of my boxes of Angron was, and it just said like Angron Demon Primarch of Khorne faction world leaders in the box, and I was like, man, it's just so weird that that's a
Got
thing.
a deck
I
that
know
says the
it's
name
super
on it.
surreal. It's like
It's not like a 2 pages inside another deck.
yeah, it's like 4 pages.
Yeah. In fact, now
um,
you go on the website to try and buy some models. There's a little drop down that you can
Little
say,
world
oh,
leaders to
World
have, yeah.
Eaters.
It feels nice. And you know what? I think we do deserve it. It's nice to have that kind
Mhm.
of uniqueness singled out. But so you've probably had a little bit of time to look at the book, look at the things inside the book, all the units and all that good stuff. And how do you feel about it? Like, what's your general? I suppose what do you like about it? What do you not like? Your overall takeaway. Like,
Mhm.
are you in general are you happy with where the world leaders are in this moment in time?
In terms of play style, 100%. I think they play exactly how they should play. I think they're brutal. They've got movement shenanigans. They can move, they can do things. They've still got access to their classic transports, and they even have shooting availability. It's not completely out there. I mean, if you want Terminators to have big bolter fire, if you want Land Raiders or Hellbrutes for more las support, you can bring those in. Forge Fiends, love Forge Fiends. And in melee, like we're second to none in terms of the output we can throw out there. And that's kind of what it should be. Um, in terms of durability, we have some, including from Psychic. I
Yep.
think we have some very interesting abilities in terms that feels really fluffy in terms of units just dying either side and being able to get points to be able to spend and do some great stuff. I think that's very interesting in terms of how you tech into your build as well also your play style. Because if you're a more reservist and tanky play style, you may not necessarily get the best out of this book. But that's not what World Eaters are about, right?
Yeah, for
So
sure, for sure.
trying to encourage a more dynamic and risk-taking play style, maybe.
Yeah.
Which I think the World Eaters are about. Big thumbs up from me. If you're picking the
Nice.
World Eaters for a durable army, you probably gone to the wrong army.
Yeah, the deck guard exists, or
Yeah,
the
Death
death
Guard
wing. Yeah,
exists, Deathwing exists,
yeah,
but they have enough durability that they can kind of get to the other side of the board, right? There's enough 3 wounds, there's enough 3-up saves, there's enough speed,
yeah.
and there's enough shenanigans, and there's enough in terms of, you know, toughness. Like Land Raider. I like a Land Raider.
It's
I should
there.
have one being commissioned.
Okay, okay.
Finally,
That's
for
that's bold. Yeah, fair enough.
it
I
is
mean,
well.
there was a Disciples of the Red Angel list last weekend that came third at a major with 2 land raiders, so it can be done. It can be
Yeah,
done.
I think it's fine. Like, um, I prefer if my more wild picks are more like Hellbrutes. I think they're really good.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I'm keen to run a Land Raider, so I'm going to be doing it.
I would do it
I've
if I
always
hadn't
wanted.
already given my one away to Jack. So maybe I
I've
made an error.
always wanted. You may think maybe done.
Yeah.
I've always wanted one. And I'm probably going to get one for my Deathwing eventually. But
Oh,
I,
very
I just
nice.
went. I just went. Oh, I just got it. It's a good excuse. But the book in general, I think it plays really great. I think we have a very fun sort of array of units that we can now pick from. So we've got some new units, very exciting. Um, we some reason have the Master of Executions. Not entirely sure why that is.
Yep, he's
That's,
there.
that's an interesting carryover as a
Like of
HQ.
all the things to carry over, I don't think he would have been high on anyone's list.
I think it's because he's got a big axe.
Yeah, I mean,
I think
there is that, I guess. Yeah.
I don't think there's much thinking
My
behind
questioning
why.
is like, they at some point they were like, okay, we need to make the selection of what units make the cut here. And
Yeah,
someone actively looked at the Master of Executions and said, that's the one. That's the
I
one
think
that comes
that.
over like Chaos Lords, over like all the other stuff that we would maybe like to have. And yeah, it was him. But
Not
here we
even
are.
a Chaos Lord in Terminator armor, or a specific Chaos Lord, or like Azrak. They produced a model for this guy.
Yep.
They didn't even make a like a generic equivalent of like Lord and Terminator armor or something like that. They just went, yeah, he's we're gonna give you like a really cool special model, and it felt really special when Azrak became a thing because
Yep.
it's like the first proper World Eaters model beyond like Khorne. This is amazing, and then it's just like, oh, he's just going to be like a Terminator Sergeant, I guess now.
Yeah, and we also have like Lord Zufor. You can still buy him on Forge Worlds.
Yeah, I'm forward
And
to
I
that.
know he himself is Legends, but he is a Terminator Lord, and yeah,
Give us
a little bit strange.
give us a generic Terminator. I like Terminators, but we
Yep,
do
yep.
have 8 pound. Great kit, looks amazing. The exalted 8 pound as well look really cool. I think they're
Yeah,
quite
I
fluffy.
I'm not a crazy big fan of the 8 pounds.
I
But
think they're great. I don't. I was never big on possessed and more like demon and starred units. So I like that they're not like got like crazy octopus limbs and stuff. I like that they still feel somewhat human.
you would not
I'm
like the
kind
8
of
pound I've put together in that case because all of mine have tentacle limbs.
tentacles and stuff.
Yeah, but it
But
is cool. I think like what they stand for, like you're saying, that more like I suppose human is the best descriptive. That kind of vibe. It is pretty awesome. I just have
because I
not
get they're
enjoyed
supposed
using
to be
them
a
in games.
replacement for possessed.
Yeah, yeah,
And
more or
they
less.
say that kind of big, tough, brutish, pimped up space marine. And it's
Pretty
like,
much, yeah.
I think having shoving 8 demons in them is a bit excessive.
8 is a
Um,
lot. Yeah. I
8 is
mean,
a
they
lot.
might be like really small demons. I don't know if they ever specified the size of the demons, right? Or was it bloodletters? I
What are
can't
they just
remember.
like 8 nurglings?
Yeah, I mean, like that's not gonna be that difficult, right? Let's be real. Like it should
Off of
be
the nurgling.
relatively okay.
Little corn nurglings.
That would be, yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. We'll
Considering
look
there's
into
only
them.
like one demon inside a demon engine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for
So
real. I
one is like
guess.
the Lord of Skulls, but 8 in this little man.
Yeah. Well, I guess not so little after they go in there, but
Yeah, they
yeah.
actually are quite
Something tells
useful.
me maybe you would have liked to see a Terminator specific unit, perhaps. The Red Butchers comes to mind.
It's the one thing I wanted.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
it genuinely, I feel like they produced nothing new, and it was just Khan and maybe Angron, like Khan, Angron, new Berserkers, and Terminators. I could live,
yeah,
and you'd have access to Land Raiders and some Hellbrutes and the other sort of Demon Engine units. If there's like nothing else, I'd be like, no, so no Lord Invocatus, no 8 pound, none of that, no Curse Lord and no Master of Executions. They just had proper Red Butchers with their own cool kit. Like the Thousand Suns Terminators look incredible,
yeah. And the
like
Deckard
genuinely
ones
incredible. And
are
the Death Cloud
exceptional.
ones,
Yeah.
as much as I don't like the Death Cloud aesthetic, I can fully appreciate the Death Shroud Terminators with the scythe are
Oh,
cool as heck, and the
they're so
Skull
sick.
Sword
Yeah.
are peak. And the Chaos Space Marine Terminators, very nice, very
Yep.
generic, very nice. Why? Why are we missing them? They're like the
I
only
feel
thing I
like
wanted.
in my head, in my dreams, I'm like, they're coming. They're like they have to be right at some point in the future. Surely we will get our own unique sculpt because it just feels like such an open design opportunity to give us a fantastic looking kit. In my opinion, anyway. But
There are amazing designs I have in my brain of what this could look like, and it's
yep.
just like they're so different to normal Terminators. Like, why not do it? Like, I would buy 30 of them.
Oh yeah, I would buy 30
Whereas the
minimum.
8 pound, I don't want any more than 12. I know they're really good, and some people want to run 27, but I'm just like, no, 12's fine. I like the model, but I don't like it that much.
I very much am in agreement. Like I'm a big Terminator fan as well.
Mm.
And I really just want to see, a unique Red Butcher sculpt or a Devourer sculpt. Like the thing is, of all the legions, at least in the Horus Heresy and the lore from what I've read, it seems like as far back as you can go, the World Leaders were one of the most established in terms of having named
Special
Terminators.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
Like
like
the
a
Red Butchers did it
thing.
before the Blight Lords were there, or I guess the
Yeah,
Scarab Cults were kind of hanging around, but like the Red Butchers were always there, you know? And I would just really like to see them go back to, you know, there's like, let's be real, there's obviously been a lot of hype around the new book, but there's been a lot of people who weren't exactly happy about the fact that we didn't necessarily get all the units that we wanted to. And I hope they can kind of see that and say, hey, you know what should be next on the chopping block is maybe a nice kit for the Red Butchers, and maybe some of the other things that people are talking about. I think that would be really
exactly.
nice.
I'm hoping there'll be like another wave. I mean, Death Guard got tons of love.
Yeah,
They got some great units that came through. I mean, they have a lot of characters available, but they do have a lot of, unique demon engines, two unique Terminators. And they definitely got a good treatment. The Thousand Suns a little bit out in the cold, a little bit, but they did get a new character recently. They do have their own Terminators. I mean,
yep.
Zangers are not as cool as Jackals, but
Nothing in the world is as cool as Jackals. I
uh,
love those little
those
guys. They're
things are
so funny.
ripped as hell as well. I
Yeah,
love them.
yeah. I only assembled mine last night, and because I was using cultists for mine,
Yeah.
and I stood them next to a cultist, and I was like, oh wow, these guys they're big, like they're hella
Yeah,
big.
they've been jacked out.
Yeah, yeah, they're awesome. Like they're like legit my favorite kit of all the new stuff. The Jackals. Like I just opened that box
Yeah,
and I was like, oh,
they're a
these are
sleeper unit.
yeah,
Sleeper
for
unit.
sure,
No,
for
A in
sure.
playstyle, but B actually, I feel they're quite cool. I know a lot of World Eaters players are like, no, I want to play World Eaters and don't think Jackals count, but I think they
Oh,
for sure
I
count.
yeah, for me they're totally all there, right? Like if they didn't have that restriction on like how many you can bring, I would probably run an army of like I think I when I was stuck in LVO and we knew the leaks of the jackals, I was putting together like a list which was like 200 and something jackals and a master of executions, and that was the whole list. And I was just like, oh, if I can do this, I'm definitely gonna run this list. But
Yeah, but they had the same restrictions in Death Garden. I think
yeah,
they do in Thousand Suns as well. So it's not like it was completely um, unexpected. And
yeah,
to be honest, when we lost a lot of units as well, like the bikers and the raptors and stuff, I fully expected them to go. Like I had no qualms about them going. I was just like, okay, that's the kind of cost you get for being your own specific faction. Is you now restricted to your units,
yeah, yeah,
and your unit pool would be smaller because you're a new faction coming in. Hopefully, there's a second wave, but because most often there is. I mean, even the Thousand Suns got their new
oh,
sorcerer
the
guy.
Yu-Gi-Oh
His name.
guy. The
Yeah,
Infernal
that's
Master,
it.
that's his name. I just
Infernal
call him
Master.
the Infernal Dude all the time. So
And he's quite cool to be fair.
he is, he is.
So they did get an extra boost. So hopefully we might get another wave at some point. But we got like 4 or 5 new kits. So it's
Yeah,
not like it's nothing.
yeah. And like
Um,
for the people who like to, hobby it up, it was always going to be pretty difficult to get all that hobby done if everything had come out all at once. It would have been super nice, but if someone handed me the 8 bound, the Juggernaut guys, new Red Butchers and new Berserkers and Jackals, I would have just been like, I can't do this. Like I am overwhelmed right now.
mhm.
But yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
New
So
Demon Prince.
yeah, he's
I've
cool.
got the new Demon Prince cup because Demon Prince is one of
Still
my
haven't
favorite
still haven't got my hands on that
ones.
one, but the kit looks good. It looks
Uh,
really
I,
nice.
I took it out of the box and I had a little look at the sprues and I'm like, oh, this
Yep.
looks nice.
Yep. I really like that
I was so
little
keen.
flamer relic in Disciples of the Red Angel that you can give the Demon Prince as well. I think that's a fun little thing to slap on.
Yeah, I think he's pretty good. Actually, when I designed a competitive list, the Demon Prince with wings is in the list
Ooh.
because I think he suits my playstyle and
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
very used to having a beat stick flying beast. I'm not sure how it would be around being a bigger model, bit harder to hide,
Yeah.
but he looks really sick, so I'm gonna give it a go.
Nice. Well, I guess we will get to maybe your thoughts on building a competitive list or what you have in mind pretty soon.
Yeah,
But I think we're just going to take a quick little break. We'll cut to something else, and then we're going to come back with maybe a bit more of a competitive chat, if that sounds cool.
sounds good.
Brilliant. Back in a sec. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to All Around the World Leaders. I am joined once again by Maxine for the second half of this show. In the first half of the show, we kind of heard a lot about Maxine and her philosophy towards engaging in games of 40k and porting over a lot of that chess mindset into the game and how that can kind of help her out on the competitive table. But I think what everyone wants to know, Maxine, is with the World Leaders book coming out and having a little bit of time to put together a list or perhaps several lists, what's on the table? What is your hot competitive take for the current World Leader build?
Oh, I've got like two kind of list ideas kind of bubbling around. The one, and I think it's fairly similar for most people because obviously the codex isn't so divergent right now. But I'll have some takes that I don't necessarily use, but understand why other people do use it. So the first off is the one I think is less competitive but more fun. It's a list mainly focused around Angron and 8-band. And that's I think the 8-band are very strong naturally, and Angron is a complete beast. And looking to focus on sort of using units like Spawn and to try and really get those sort of blood type buffs going, just to either A, rev up the 8-band and rev up Angron. It's fairly straightforward, it's a fairly beat down style list. The one that I'm actually probably going to take more often than not, and the one that's going to be a bit more serious. And it can be made better than what I've got in my mind. But the problem is I don't like using forward wild units, and likewise, I don't have any Chaos Knight stuff. And I'm very much wanting to stay to World Eater's Codex. Um, and that list is focused around the Lord Invocatus being your HQ. From there, I've got 12 8-band into multiple squads of 6. I've got one squad of 3 Exalted. I've got one squad of 5 Red Butcher Terminators. I've got to add them in because
Okay,
I
we
love
well
them
we
so
need to
much.
revisit that point. That's an interesting one.
Because I love them.
Yeah.
I always feel like I just can't not add them. They're not maybe not necessarily as points efficient, but they do hit like bricks. So if you convert it to Dark Angels, which I'm also fairly familiar with, it's like bringing your Deathwing Knights as opposed to just standard Hemis. Less, you know, straight up, but they add a bit of durability. They add a bit of shooting. Um, they just add something, I think.
Okay.
And it certainly gives a bit of tactical play, especially if you want to deep strike or not. I know reserves are free now, but it gives you just a bit more maneuverability on the board itself. I've got a Demon Prince with wings. I love that sort of like that queen chess piece unit that can literally go in and bonk something. I mean, Lord Invocatus can kind of do the same thing as well, but I've got another role kind of in mind for him.
Okay.
Um, and a Demon Prince with wings can be very good at covering certain flanks, going in and just getting the business done. Um, he's a bit harder to hide now that I want to use the bigger model, but I still think you can play it on a good GT terrain board. Um, I've got Khorne. Again, he's someone I just like bringing. He can res and just like absolutely mulch small stuff. He's particularly good at going into like standard Space Marines. With its volume of attacks as well, are quite good into some of the more meta units and armies I'm seeing right at the moment. But he's quite hard to character block because I've not got many units on the board, and he probably will go down more often. So he's going to be a very careful unit to play with. Um, but one that has so far in my test games done all right. So I'm going to keep it. Plus, I have a limitation of the number of models I
Once again, right?
have. That is usually a thing. And to be fair, I like self-imposing that I just can't have everything I want because I find it usually makes me play better by just or being more innovative on the board rather than just being innovative in throwing cash at the problem, if you know what I mean.
Not paying to win, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that
As
makes
much as
sense.
I don't clearly don't have a problem with throwing cash at the the hobby,
Well,
it's more
we all have that problem, I guess.
yeah, I think it just gives me my own peace of mind that helps me sleep at night. I don't know.
Yep.
Um, So I've got, and then 2 squads of 10 berserkers and rhinos.
Two squads of
I
10.
like
Okay.
2 squads of 10. And I can split one of the 10 into 2 squads of 5. And that's probably what I'm going to do more often than not. But currently it's at 2 squads of 10. I've got a unit of jackals, possibly 2 units of chaos spawn, or maybe even 3 if I can shove it, would be a better pick. But I don't like chaos spawn. I'm throwing it out there. I think they look goofy.
Oh, whoa, whoa,
I
whoa, whoa,
don't
whoa,
feel.
whoa. Okay, we are spawn appreciators here on the channel. Okay,
I know
so
you
just
guys
tread
like
real
them very,
carefully.
but
This
I
is going to
think
be
they
coming
look
out the
good.
episode after I've done a show with Ron, and we
Yeah.
we wax lyrical for maybe 10 minutes about the beauty of the chaos spawn. So yeah,
I
this
think, to
is
be
this is
fair, they are
interesting.
brilliant units. I just don't feel like they are Chaos Space Marine or World Eater units. I just think of them as demons.
Yeah, that's
I
fair.
think in a demon army, if I was to run a Khorne demons, they'll be like one of the first units I'd want to have in it.
So do you want to
But
know
I'm
something
just like,
funny about that, Maxine? You can
oh,
actually you can't include spawn in chaos
I
demon armies.
know
It's
it's
so weird.
crazy.
Like,
It,
but
it's a demon.
in the 8th edition data sheet, there was a spawn, or in the 8th edition codex, there was a spawn data sheet in there because a bunch of the Zinch guys could turn enemies
Yeah,
into spawn. So they had to
into
include the
spawn.
data sheet. But yeah, they don't have the demon keyword, they don't have demon saves, they're technically not demons. It's just, what are they, you know?
It's dumb, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So
But I totally see what you mean that they don't really feel like Space Marine models. I think maybe if they made the model look a little bit more like a Space Marine that's like exploded out or something. But as it stands, it's like, okay, cool. So you got all the guys in armor running around and, doing their stuff. And then it's like, and who brought this guy? Like, where did he come from?
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And you'll find most of my picks are kind of goes down that vein in the sense that I take units that I like and try and make them as good as I can. So for example, I don't really like Forge World stuff. A, I don't like the resin. B, I don't necessarily like how most of the Forge World stuff looks. And B, I like having, maybe it's because of my more autistic brain, but I like having everything from the codex.
Okay,
Everything beyond the codex kind of feels like I'm using a DLC patch thing
that makes sense.
that's
Yeah, yeah,
separate.
yeah.
And I just
So
think it's like,
if you don't
I
mind,
don't
I'm
know.
I'm curious about one thing you said at the beginning of this list because you think it could be
Hmm.
more optimized with the inclusion of four drill units, right?
Yeah,
Like
it
what
could
unit do
be.
you see slotting in there that would be a good inclusion?
The Contemptor Dread could be a
Mm-hmm.
better shooting option than necessarily what I'm having in my mind because I've got shooting options in my list, including a Land Raider and a Hellbrute. But before we discuss
I mean,
those ones,
they're really good.
there are better shooting options you could potentially think about. How that plays and how that plays specifically in this takes, I think, more practice than I have. But in my brain concept, I think there's options to look into, particularly with the latest updates. Um, I will say that the list options I pick just from the codex for shooting is obviously not as good as say if you wanted to ally in with some Chaos Knight and the little puppies,
Yeah, yeah,
because those guys are pretty savage. And it does offer a lot to World Eaters to add that, particularly with the Blood Tithe mechanics. Just getting that extra phase, particularly early in the game, to start revving up your points. Because I find that's one of the things that can bog you down early, is when you want to just rev up something just a little early and maybe particularly try and trade up a little bit, maybe with the unit of jackals, for example. If you can just throw some points out there early, just to get an extra buff of AP or something, it can really just make them go, whoa, I put out something fairly durable and you just absolutely savaged me with something that would cost nothing.
yeah. Jackals with like
And now
even a
you've got your
single
points back.
tithe is wild. Like you pop exploding
Yeah,
sixes or +1 to hit on them, and they're silly. They really are quite silly.
exactly. They can chew through Space Marines pretty well. Now that Armor Contempt's gone the sort of like the AP, they can really do damage to some units. So I I think it can definitely spook people.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
having shooting to be able to open up those options is important. Currently, as I was telling you, I've got like the Terminators, a Land Raider, a Hellbrute, Um, if I can, I would add my Forge Fiend if I could, but I don't have the points now because everything's quite pricey. But
Yep. Yep.
I like my
Feels
Forge
pretty
Fiend.
elite.
I like my Forge.
I'm glad that you like the Forge Fiends. Let's
Yeah.
put it like that, okay? I think it's a really so that's pretty much the archetype, right? That's the list when you add in the raider and the brute, right? It's cool because
Yeah,
it
exactly.
feels like it's an awful lot of hammer units. It's but like
Yes.
there's so many of them in this list. It feels like it's kind of like every time you take something out of the game and it gets removed off the board, it's sort of like it has a replacement coming in the next turn straight away, which must be incredibly
Mhm.
difficult to play against because it feels like a really strong pressure list, if that makes
It's
sense.
exactly that. It's designed to really amp up that pressure, but through getting the blood type mechanics as the goes on, as I die, they die, I die, they die. It's got decent obsec opportunities, and things that aren't obsec are designed just to tear through anything that could potentially be anywhere near objectives, and to be relatively quick at doing so, whether that's the Demon Prince, the 8 bound. Even the Berserkers are pretty speedy to get in with potential like 3d6 charge style.
Yep, yep,
And
for
could
sure.
and could shimmy up the board if you try and like poke at them a little bit. But you're exactly right. It's designed to be fast, fairly oppressive, and designed to anything that sort of comes into mid board. It's kind of like old style Drakari, when they had just lots of units that just came out and just battered you.
Yep,
Obviously,
I remember it
Drakari
all too
were
well.
obviously
Yeah,
Drakari were cheaper and just had more units they could do that with. But it's the same kind of concept.
yep.
But and leveraging a little bit of range from like say like the Dark Lancers instead. I've got a few las cannons and some multi-melted star stuff.
Yeah, which isn't actually too dissimilar from the Darklands profile, really, when you think about it. It's 4 shots coming out of the big tank, D3 plus 3 versus D6 plus 2. It's not that far away from it.
It's
That's
pretty
really cool,
similar.
though. Yeah, awesome. So, have you had the chance to actually put this list or something similar to it down on the board and run it out for a spin, take it for some games? And if
Hmm.
you have, like, how's that gone?
Yeah, I've done it against two different armies and they're very different style, and that's kind of the aim for it. One was against Tau, against a reasonable Tau player. I wouldn't say they're a very strong Tau player, but it's a kind of list that pilots itself for Tau. It's very gunline style, so it was a good litmus test to see how I could get across a board and particularly control a game with units that die quite well. Not necessarily MSU, but could really try and blitz anything they got close to. And how can I get close to units like Tau if I wanted to? And then the other game I had was against Dark Angels, which was a very Deathwing heavy list. And that was the game I was actually quite looking forward to because I felt like that was a game that Wild Eaters can do pretty well into.
I think so too. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
because the thing they lack or are scared of is volume and armies that can dictate combat pretty well. I know they have and it's volume from fewer units because they have strats like line unbreakable and stuff that mass horde units can really struggle going into. But when you've got a guy like Khorne just spitting out a ton of attacks, and it's like one dude. You can't stop this one dude.
Yeah, carrying into
He's
like
going to
five
be able,
Terminators feels pretty good because he's damaged 3 now as well,
yeah,
right? So he can pick
yeah.
up.
I sent him into 3 Deathwing Knights, and the Deathwing Knights were not happy.
No, I can imagine they were quite upset about that. But
They
like
were,
it's like you said, it's the volume from small squads because you have the perfect balance of like small squads, high quality
mhm.
and high volume. So you can't really do shield
Yeah,
unbreakable. You've got the AP. Strength is I guess a little bit irrelevant with inner circle, but you've got everything else going for you. And then if you've got a blood type
yeah,
buffer
and you're not
thrown in,
paying too many points for that extra buff in strength, really. You're paying
yeah,
more for
yeah,
the attacks and the AP, I feel, because the strength is just a little bit better. So like, I feel like it's a fairly efficient matchup, particularly with some 8 bound going in there. And, you know, they're not necessarily super killy going back into you because most people aren't necessarily running tons of lightning claws right now, which is perfect for dealing with more units or more bodies coming through. Most of them are trying to swing at you with thunderhammers, and it's like slightly less efficient at say knocking back some relatively tough units, particularly if you've got like say a couple of Terminators that you threw in there or some 8 bound, you've got still relatively okay saves to that.
Yeah, especially if
And
like
then
those
all
two
got them.
units, yeah, is quite. If you have the 6 up Feel No Pain as well on them, it can really mess around with the Thunder Hammer damage spilling over and
Yeah,
things like
and
that.
with units, I found that with units like Lord Invocatus and the Demon Prince, for example, to get towards where characters are, particularly like the really buffing supporting ones, because I managed to get into their apothecary pretty easily.
I was gonna
And
say when you were
I
lining that up,
threw
I was
away
like,
my Demon Prince. I threw away my Demon Prince to actually tag their Deathwing Librarian and their Ravenwing Apothecary, and I took them both out with the Demon Prince. I was just like, okay, he's gonna die, but no
that's
more
a
extra
pretty
turns.
nice trade though. Yeah, it's
Yeah, I'll
taking in
take
a
it. I'll
lot of.
take it.
Yeah,
So
awesome.
the extra speed to kind of get up and over and to get to those sort of backline sort of snipey characters was pretty good. I don't think my player necessarily protected them as well as they could have done, but I don't think they really um they kind of felt like they were in the driving seat with the faction they were playing as, if you know what I mean. They
Yes,
kind of
yeah,
felt
yeah.
like they could just win the game rather than actually have to play it. And then against Tau,
That's a nice way of
and then
saying it, but yeah.
yeah, that's being fair. And then against Tau, it was kind of a similar kind of story. It's a case of actually being quite infantry based, which is usually how I like my armies. I was able to actually keep into terrain fairly comfortably. The Terminators I found very useful in that matchup because they were actually one of the few durable units I had. Then when I say durable, I mean like one stuck in cover. You know, my saves are pretty decent consistently. The Land Raider is actually pretty useful in that engagement as well, but it was never going to win sort of like the gunline battle. It's just a really tough transport. I think obviously I paid too many points for the role it really served. I think a Rhino probably would have done a better role. Um, but it was interesting just seeing that the Land Raider could still kind of do something in that engagement. Um, and I particularly found the 8 bound were just so fast, and being infantry just meant it was very hard for Tau to get the right lines to actually try and stop them before they got in. And the Berserkers being able to come in from out of cover from with the extra charge range start or like the less risk charge was also something that was pretty nasty because you could then use that to tag pretty effectively. And with a 10-man unit, which is what I used with, it was actually very annoying for them to try and get away from that because I was able to string it pretty well. And as much as like some of the bigger tanks could shoot in combat and all that kind of stuff, it's like that's a lot of Zerkers you got to shoot,
Yeah, I mean, like they're
and
not
they're
going to
also
be able
very
to get
angry.
all of them, right?
Yeah, exactly, and they're all very angry. So if you mess up, they're gonna make you pay for it.
Awesome. Right. So 2 wins from your first few games, by the sounds of it.
2 wins from
Yeah,
yeah,
big.
two
Okay.
wins from
And I'm really interested because like I think you played into like what I suppose is broadly perceived as two kind of boogeyman armies for the world leaders, right? You've got the Tau, which has historically
yeah.
been a really tough game for us, and Dark Angels, which is a very oppressive army in the meta as it stands right now. So, do you think that there's really any sort of like kryptonite, apart from maybe Gene Stealer Cult, which strikes everyone as kind of maybe the obvious weakness? But do you think there's any other armies kind of hovering around out there that would be a massive struggle for your list to play into?
Um, Sort of a Ravenwing focused um Dark Angels army because that is significantly faster. It shoots just as effectively as Tau. It has the ability to alpha strike you pretty hard. I think that's pretty scary. I think demons is also fairly effective because they, like Gene Stealer Cult, can just pop up and be very, very painful. They hit very hard in combat as well and have their own tricks. And likewise, they're bloodthirster that can kind of have the wound
Yeah, the face
reduction.
cap guy.
He's
Yeah.
the wound cap is hard to deal with,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
and that's one of the things that we do potentially struggle going into, especially when you try and nuke characters, for example, because a lot of my units do try and hit characters pretty well, and if there's a character that will just not die, that will cause problems.
Yep. For sure. For sure.
Um, I see them being a challenge. I don't necessarily see. I can see Votan having its challenges purely from the bikes.
Yes.
I think I think the bikes are fairly decent into us, but that's like the one key unit they have that could be devastating towards what World Eaters can bring because it can lay down a squad of berserkers pretty fast, and they are fast units and they are obsec, so they can just be a complete nuisance. Um, and I think in weird ways you've got traditional Eldar with units like Sweeping Hawks,
Don't
the
talk to me
units
about
that
sweeping hawks. They're like my. I have nightmares about sweeping hawks.
um, that kind of being able to shoot you then and keep their distance all the time is also fairly hard because Tau will do that as well, but just I think not quite as maneuverable as Eldar can be, and they don't, in my opinion. So it's those are the kind of armies I'd be really worried against. There are armies that I feel very happy going into. But those are the armies I think are a little bit more nervous going.
Yeah, high maneuverability armies. It's kind of seems to be the theme that you picked out there, right? High maneuverability
Yeah,
with
exactly.
decent or to good levels of shooting.
Because that's one of the things that I think the New World Eaters book has done pretty well. It's given us maneuverability as much as we're coming in with an axe to a gunfight. It's given us the option to swing the axe. Whereas if someone's on a bike with a big gun, it's very hard to swing an axe into a bike with a big gun.
Absolutely.
And
What a
I'm someone who
fantastic
likes
analogy.
I'm someone who likes really controlling games and controlling the engagements where possible. There are times when you can do that into faster armies by playing your opponent and making them choose the engagements that you want
Yeah,
by giving
right,
them no
yeah.
choice. There are times you can do that. But against strong players, it's very hard to to change it around because they know that you're doing that. And quite often when I'm playing in the finals tables or against players who won super majors and stuff, it's much harder to play those kind of tactics against those because they just know what is happening on the board much clearer than say someone who's on a middle table or fighting for a top 10 spot.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it goes back to a lot of what you were saying previously about that kind of like it's not quite psyops, but it kind of is. You know, where it's like you're playing the player. I think was how you phrased it. Like you're not just necessarily playing the game, but like you're also playing against this person and their perception of the game. It's really interesting, and I think I can see why. Like I've played Hail of Doom Eldar with the new book, and I found
Mhm.
it reasonably easy. But that's because I think I was able to play the player who was maybe not necessarily able to move around everything as well as he could. But I know that there are some people in my local scene who play Hail of Doom Eldar, and if I played against them, I'm never winning that game because of their understanding
Yeah,
of the maneuverability and how much it could affect the world leaders.
yeah, exactly. It's a bunch of moving parts, and if you're able to keep tabs of all these moving parts and to really make sure you keep all these pieces you've got safe, because if you lose any of your pieces in that kind of army, things fall down very quickly.
Oh yeah,
But if you're
definitely.
able to if you're able to keep them safe, you're able to strike at the right places at the right time and actually necessarily plan not just 2 turns ahead, but in terms of being planning where they're going to move, your ability to then shoot them where they're going to move, and have somewhere for you to then move away that they can't get back to is a very hard thing to be able to track for all of your units on the table. And you're right, there are players who are that good. Ben Jones from Vanguard Tactics is someone who springs to mind. He's one of their Eldar coaches, and I played him, and he's someone who does that phenomenally well with Eldar. And you can't sort of play that game with him because he just knows where those bits are. So you have to play his game plan,
Yeah, which
which
is
is very
always
different.
yeah, it's very
Exactly, which
different.
is very different from you being able to control a game by forcing an opponent. But an opponent that's not willing to be forced, you then have to play their game plan and find a tactic to beat that game plan. And it's very different to be able to do that.
For sure. So I think to wrap it up, I guess the final question that I want to ask, and this is kind of something that I've tended to ask most of the people who've come on the show, is in the future, obviously, world leaders. Now we have our own book, like we've talked about. It's fantastic. We're this expanding faction, and it's super super exciting. And I can't wait to see what the future holds because this really feels like just breaking the surface. But give us the highlights or what you think the things that you're most excited about for the future of world leaders as a faction, Maxine.
Yeah, exactly. As you said, this is only the beginning. So I think the big exciting part of that now, World Eaters has now split out from normal Space Marines, is that sort of focus on being able to make what makes World Eaters good sort of viable in play style. Because Chaos Space Marines are always a combat focused army, but they always play points and had rules written around being able to shoot as well and having armies like Iron Warriors in there. All their units, everything in that book was pointed, rules appropriately, and all that kind of good stuff. Assuming that you're going to be playing multiple phases of the game, even the psychic phase. That's like a really important part in like the old book, like having the Demon Prince was so good with his psychic powers, but then it's just like,
Stop. Yeah, it's so. Oh, it
uh,
was so frustrating. Yeah, yeah.
but I get an extra attack.
Oh boy,
Oh
how
boy,
great,
that's exciting.
isn't it? Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah.
So that focus, being able to be separated out and now thinking, right, you've got this more mono-styled faction in the sense that combat is not the be all and end all. There are war bands that focus on different styles, right?
Theoretically, yes.
Whether that's hit and run, the Lord Inficata style, or whether
Yeah,
it's a bit more of a rootin' tootin' shooting style explosions with bigger tanks and demon engines. They've alluded to those kind of war bands. Um, the main focus is about trying to make combat better. And how do you do that? Is what they're doing now is by bringing in fluffy rules, which make you more movable, being able to make sure that you can, once you get there, be pretty scary, but in a good way. We have the blood tithe mechanic at the moment, which I think is very exciting. Obviously, that probably won't stay too long. There'll be little adjustments here and there. Um, I've seen actually from the Age of Sigmar world with the new Slanesh coming out with the new was it the depravity points that they've got coming out,
oh
which is
yeah, yeah. I saw that.
super
Yeah.
flavorful. But that kind of mindset to a faction is so important, and you see that with like how Thousand Suns got this really cool psychic phase. You saw that with Death Guard being able to be super durable and how lots of core rules to help make them just really survivable and make them play how Death Guard feel, which is slow and basically just undying coming towards you. Thousand Suns just being super tricksy, super mind bending, tough to deal with kind of
30-minute
armies.
long psychic
Um,
phases. Yeah.
exactly, but whereas now, like World Eaters will have that same focus going forwards, and there will be potentially more units to help add to that focus, right? To be make it more divergent from what was essentially just an offshoot of the Chaos Space Marines book.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
For sure.
and they're fairly unique. Obviously, with Space Marines, you've got all the different chapters and stuff, but there's supplements. They all come back to being able to access units from the main book, and there's slight little tweakings of the rules. World Eaters is very different. They're their own army. They're their own faction. There are some common units from Chaos Space Marines and other Chaos Space Marine units like a Forge Fiend or a Hellbrood, but by and large, the focus is purely on being able to make this army tick. And I think being able to grow a fan base for this army will open up more options for characters. Other units maybe like Red Butcher Terminators or
Any
something
day
similar,
now.
like that. But having an interest in this faction will only boost what can be done with this faction going forwards. Whereas I think before it was a very niche army to
Yeah.
think about, and Death Guard and Thousand Suns were kind of similar before they got their time in the sun. And now it's like, oh, actually, no, this is a fully mainline army. I can see them being more popular than, say, Gene Stealer cults, for example.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is look around at the amount of deck guard players who are who are at every single tournament, you know, or even I know Thousand Suns isn't quite as popular as the Deck Guard, but World Leaders have a just an appeal to
Yeah, Death
people
Guard
in
had that
general, I
eighth
think.
edition
Starter box kind of
bad
syndrome, yeah,
guys.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly, and they got tons of new characters coming through, whereas Thousand Suns haven't really had too much since they got
No,
released.
yeah, I think they could do with a little bit of love.
But I think it's very similar. I love Thousand Suns. I think they're really cool, but less of a fan of Death Guard. I think they're a bit icky for me. But
Fair.
but I think it's just that focus of what GW being able to look at World Eaters as their own army, and I really do hope that they don't try and merge us back into, say, Khorne Demons or Chaos Space Marines in the future editions. I'd like to be kept separate,
Yeah, you want to
just
maintain the
because
identity, right?
yeah, it's about maintaining that kind of independence and that feel that they're giving you the proper attention, you're not just a side project.
For sure.
Because again, it comes back to when you're just an offshoot, you're missing out on the psychic, you're missing out on the shooting, and then your rules just feel really flat because of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for that comprehensive answer, Maxine. And I think that does about wrap up the end of this show. It's been fantastic having you on, Maxine. Thank you so
Well,
much
thank you. It's been nice to
for
chat
joining
in
us.
person.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
love watching.
I mean, I love chatting. It's like I think you have a really interesting perspective on like a kind of like a top-down view of the game that I think a lot of people don't
Is
always
that
think
at all,
about.
Jake?
No, 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 no. I mean for real, like, you know, looking at it from the this eye of like being able to think like, you know, several turns ahead because my brain is like capable of just about thinking 2 units ahead in the current phase that I'm in, let alone multiple turns
Yeah,
ahead in the game. So I think it's super interesting to listen to someone who is greatly superior at playing the game than I am, but hopefully will impart a lot of advice to people. So thank you so much, Maxine. Is there anyone you'd like to
most
shout out
welcome.
before we close this one out?
Goodness, my fiance for helping indulge in my hobby and actually taking up to further extremes than I have ever done.
Awesome.
So that's Katie from Tabletop Tactics, and she certainly helps fund my World Eater edition.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much, Maxine. And thank you, everyone, for watching this episode of All Around the World Eaters. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know what you thought of it in the comments down below. So until the next one, folks, stay healthy, stay safe, and kill, maim, burn.